Fatima crouched in the underbrush on the outskirts of Tangier, her heart pounding against her chest. The lights of Ceuta glimmered faintly across the strait, a beacon of hope and desperation. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering information, making connections with smugglers, and saving every dirham she could. Morocco had been her home, but it was also her prison. Poverty, unemployment, and her stifling family situation had driven her to the edge. Spain was her dream, a place where she could build a future for herself no matter the cost. The smuggler, a man of few words with a hardened face, motioned for her and the small group of migrants to move. There were 6 of them in total, 2 young men from Senegal, a middle-aged Algerian man, and a couple from the Ivory Coast. None of them spoke, and Fatima could feel the weight of their shared fear as they neared the border fence of Ceuta, one of Spain's 2 enclaves in North Africa. The fence stood tall and menacing, topped with razor wire and patrolled by both Moroccan and Spanish police. Fatima had heard the stories. People being beaten by border guards, left bleeding or deported. Others who were lucky enough to cross found themselves trapped in the limbo of refugee centers. And then, there were those who had disappeared altogether, lost in the rough waters of the Mediterranean. But she had no other choice. This was her only way out. They waited for the cover of darkness, the sea breeze cold and salty against Fatima's face. Her eyes darted nervously between the smuggler and the fence, but the man remained calm, giving her a brief nod before he cut a small hole in the wire. One by one, they crawled through the gap. The sound of a distant siren sent a wave of panic through the group, but they moved as quietly and swiftly as they could. Once on the other side, they ran. Fatima's legs burned as they scrambled across the rugged terrain. The lights of Ceuta grew closer, but so did the risk of being caught. Suddenly, a shout pierced the night. Spanish police. They had been spotted. The group scattered, and Fatima sprinted toward the cliffs, her heart in her throat. The sound of boots crashing through the underbrush grew louder behind her. She could hear the others shouting in different languages, the police barking commands in Spanish. She didn't stop running until she reached the shoreline. The vast stretch of the Mediterranean Sea spread out before her like an endless expanse of uncertainty. Fatima had no time to think. The smuggler had left an inflatable boat hidden under some rocks, just big enough for the 6 of them, but only she and the 2 Senegalese men had made it this far. They dragged the boat into the water, the waves cold and unforgiving. The motor sputtered to life, and they sped into the night, leaving the shoreline and the police behind. The sea was treacherous. Waves tossed the small boat, and Fatima gripped the sides, praying silently. The horizon seemed endless, and the dark sky pressed down on them, making her feel as though they were the only people left in the world. The Senegalese men took turns steering the boat, their faces tense, eyes scanning the water for the patrols they knew would be searching for them. Spanish coast guards had no mercy for these caught crossing illegally. Hours passed, the night growing colder. Fatima's fingers were numb, her body aching from fear and exhaustion. She had heard of migrants drowning in these waters, their bodies never found. Every time a wave crashed against the boat, her heart skipped a beat. But then, as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, she saw it. The faint outline of the Spanish coast. Her heart swelled with hope, but she knew the hardest part was still ahead. Fatima waded through the shallow water, her legs weak but driven by sheer willpower. She staggered onto the beach, collapsing onto the sand. The men followed behind her, equally exhausted but alive. Spain was under her feet now, but she had no papers, no status. She was an illegal migrant in a foreign land, and the threat of deportation was constant. Her first days in Spain were a blur. She moved through the shadows, avoiding the police, relying on the kindness of fellow migrants and strangers who sympathized with her plight. She slept in abandoned buildings, eating what little she could find or afford. Each day was a battle for survival, and each night brought new fears. Would she be caught and sent back? Would she ever find work? Weeks passed, and Fatima found herself in the outskirts of Madrid, where a small Moroccan community had formed. They helped her find temporary work cleaning houses and washing dishes. It was under the table, poorly paid, but it was something. She was no longer running. For the first time in months, she felt a sliver of hope. But the journey had changed her. The sea, the fear, the uncertainty. They had left scars deeper than any she had anticipated. Yet, as she walked through the crowded streets of Madrid, she allowed herself to dream. She was here. She had made it. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in her life, it was hers to walk. And that, to Fatima, was freedom.